For about a year now, I have been working on a game called Sidestep Legends. It is a moba-inspired action roguelike game about dodging spells and killing minions, and was recently fully released on Steam after a few months of early access. I have been developing this game in C using the game library called Raylib. Let's take a look at the whole process of developing this game from the first prototype looking like this, to the final form in the full release looking like this. But first, just a quick reminder to check out the game on Steam and subscribe to the channel, since both help me continue working full-time as an indie developer. Let's go back to May 2022 when it all began. This is the first prototype of the game. Here I just wanted to test the basic idea of dodging spells with some very basic graphics. And very soon after, I did the first test for an animated 3D model. I wanted to do this early, since I was not sure how well this would work with Raylib, and needed to evaluate if it would be a good fit for this project. So I started with just one of the default models on Mixamo, since I wanted to use the Mixamo animations for the game to save both time and money. Next, I needed to find some good models to use for the project. Since this project was meant to not take that long to make, I had decided to buy assets for it. So I found the Synth store, which had some good looking assets that would fit the theme well. So I did a quick try first with one of the cheaper packs to make sure I could get it to work with my tech stack. I hooked up the model with some Mixamo animations, and as you can see, it worked out quite well. Next I started doing some work with the lighting and trying out ideas for the ground. And then I added support for shadows. Since Raylib does not have a fully implemented renderer, like a game engine such as Unity has, I had to do these things myself. Some simple shading and shadow mapping is not that time consuming to make though, as I had done that a few times in the past already. Then I added a particle system. Again I had to make this myself, but that was quite quick as well. Soon after I created some fire sprites to start realizing the first ability you would have to dodge, the flame strike. Then some small improvements, such as smoothly turning the character, followed up by a more visually appealing effect for the flame strike. Here I also added the first ability for the player, the dash. No fancy UI for it yet though, I just had a text rendered that counts down the cooldown for the ability after it was used. Next I started working on the actual first map of the game. Here you can see the ground, which is made of a few different textures rendered with the help of a mask texture. With the red, green and blue channels, I used to paint the different textures on the ground. Next, another lighting pass. Here I added a point light to give some light from the flame strike abilities. Now it was time to start with the actual roguelike part of the game, as I added the first upgrades. You get to pick between a few randomly selected upgrades when leveling up, which you do after picking up enough XP crystals. The XP crystals spawn randomly in a circle around you after a flame strike has been spawned. Next they added icons for the abilities and upgrades, and shortly after some actual UI by visually showing the cooldown on the ability icons. I also added a second ability, the block ability. It makes the player invulnerable but unable to move for a short duration. Now I moved to June 2022 and the second hostile ability, the root projectile, was added. This has been a source of frustration for many players that have tried the game since then, but is still in the game today. Here is also where I added the first menu screen. It does not look much for the world, and to be honest, it is not going to end up that much more impressive in the end, since I really don't like creating menu UI. Next was some mockups for the in-game UI, a very primitive one showing what type of information I needed to show. I showed that to my wife, who helped me with the in-game UI to make it look like a proper UI. Here I also added the first sound effects, as well as support for terrain on the map. The actual map design was made by my wife in Blender using some assets I bought from Synth. I added the new graphics for the in-game UI shortly after, and here's the result. I also improved the level up UI a little bit here, but at this time it was not properly scaled for larger screen resolutions. This was something I did not notice at the time, since I was developing mostly using a window screen of 1920 by 1080. But when going back with version control to record these clips in full screen 4K, it became very noticeable. Here a new hostile ability, Firefork, was added. Moving into July 2022, more terrain and objects were added on the map. And right after I added support for collisions against the map objects. I also added two new abilities, Blink and Sprint. I think they speak for themselves in what they do. Then I started working on the meta progression of the game, an important component in roguelike games. The first thing needed was some currency for it. I settled on just plain simple gold, so now gold coins have a chance to spawn when the XP crystals spawn. But we need somewhere to spend the gold, so I added an upgrade screen. Here you could upgrade some passive stats like movement speed, max health and XP gain. At this time I also publicly announced the game and published a Steam page. And soon after I released a demo of the game on Steam, which was made of the content I had made so far. With the demo available to the public, I started to get some feedback from it. Some smaller improvements were quick enough to fix straight away. But I put any larger suggestions to the side for now to continue with the things I had planned, which was some more variety in the hostile abilities. Starting with the hook ability. This one is quite iconic in the MOBA genre. Most recognize it from Pudge in Dota, and both Blitzcrank and Thresh in League of Legends have their own versions of it. And of course there is Stitches from the best MOBA, Heroes of the Storm. Next I wanted to give the colors of the game an uplift, since right now they were looking quite bland. I did not know it at the time, but this was mostly due to a bug in the way I handled gamma corrections in my shader. I found I fixed this later in the project. But for now I solved it with some color correction through a lookup texture. At this time I also added the passive ability for this character, Berserker's Feet. It gives the character more movement speed as their current health is lower. So running around with low health will let you run faster, but of course the risk of dying is greater. Right now the game was a bit too simple, all you had to do was dodge spells, and there was really nothing encouraging the player to move around the map. You might as well just find the easiest spot and stay there the whole time. The first thing I added to solve this was vases. The vases spawn around the map and have a yellow circle around them. If the player stands in the circle for a little while, the vase will break and drop XP crystals and gold coins. Moving into August 2022, I improved the visibility and look of the XP crystals and gold coins by making them glow. I also changed the ground texture, since the old one was a bit too obviously repeating. And then came the next big addition, obelisk challenges. This could be activated by the player by stepping in the middle of it. And while activated, it starts shooting spells in all directions from its center. To defeat it, you have to stand in the circles that appear around it. I really lean into the circle mechanic for the game, since I think it made the challenge of dodging spells more interesting. You have to balance standing in the circles to get better loot, with dodging enough abilities to not die. When the challenge is defeated, you get a chest that will give you a number of random upgrades picked from the upgrades you have already started. The last thing I added in August was the clone ability. It creates a few clones of your character that run around and can be targeted by the hostile spells. This means all the attention is no longer focused on you for a while. A good defensive ability. In September 2022, I added another big addition to the game, the boss. He will chase you, leaving a poison trail that damages you if you stand in it. And if he runs you over, you get stunned. To defeat him, you have to activate the traps that spawns around the map and fool him into running into them. Next up, I redesigned the meta progression, replacing the previous flat upgrade system with a skill tree. This should make for a more interesting meta progression in the end, even though the skill tree at this time did not look that impressive. Then I added an important quality of life feature, swapping ability hotkeys. Since the abilities are unlocked from randomly selected upgrades, they often end up at different hotkeys from your last run, even if you pick the same abilities, unless you held off picking an ability until you could have it in your preferred slot. This was no longer an issue, since now you could swap their places around on the pause screen. October 2022 was a big month for the game. I started small by adding a new ability, Hardened Shield, which reduces the damage the player takes while active. This was when I worked my last day at my then full-time job and started working full-time as an indie developer on this project. This gave me time to do the next big addition to the game. I had gotten some feedback that just dodging skills being the only challenge sounded quite boring, and I started to agree that after a while it could become a bit bland. In MOBA games, there is always the offensive part of the game in addition to dodging skill shots thrown at you. If you only dodge, you don't get far, you need to kill minions as well. So I started working on minions that would walk along a predefined path that the player could kill. To start with, I added basic attacks that the character will perform automatically while standing still when an enemy is in range. I also added two offensive abilities, Weapon Throw and Weapon Swing. With Weapon Throw, the character throws their weapon in front of them and it damages any enemies it runs through. With Weapon Swing, the character swings their weapon around them, damaging any enemies hit. The clip you are watching shows the prototype of the minions, basic attacks and weapon abilities. Next I needed some effects for these new things. So I made graphics for the minions. You might recognize the look, since it is inspired by the wisps in Warcraft 3. For the basic attack, I used the particle effect from the flame strike to create the fireball, and I added the weapon that goes with the character to create the weapon throw and weapon swing effects. Then came November, and there were some not so visual improvements I had to do. So far, the assets used in the game builds were basically the source assets, which were then loaded to the game at startup. There were two issues with this. The first, it is not very professional to deliver builds with a bunch of scattered source assets, and you might not be allowed in some license agreements for both assets. The second issue is that the source format of the assets are usually not optimized for loading, but instead optimized for being possible to edit. To solve this, I needed some kind of resource packaging step in my asset pipeline, but this could take quite some time to implement myself. To my rescue came RRS Packer and RRS, an app and a file format for packaging resources, both made by the same person that started Raylib. So I bought the app and started working on integrating the package format to my asset pipeline. It was very straightforward since the format API came with examples on how to use it with Raylib. I really recommend it to anyone that needs a resource packager. Next thing on the agenda was to improve the workflow for adding new things to the skill tree. So far I had done it manually with code, which was really inconvenient and gave me headaches every time I had to do it. So I made a skill tree editor. It is pretty simple. You can drag around the upgrades and add or remove connections between them. It is made with Raylib as a separate app in the same codebase as the game. The most important thing is the cleanup button, which automatically moves all the icons to the closest position that matches the allowed distance from its connections. With this new editor, adding new things to the skill tree was much faster. What you are seeing right now is the final skill tree for the full release of the game, so it does not represent the skill tree that was present during this time. Then the map was updated a few times. It was getting closer to being finished, one area at a time. I added support to render objects in the map as instances, increasing the rendering performance of the map now when all these grass turfs were added. I also added a new ability, Weapon Dash. This one was suggested by a friend of mine. He suggested that an ability like Blade Search of Aurelia in League of Legends would work well in this game and feel good to use. So I basically added that ability. The character dashes through a target and deals damage. If the target dies, then the cooldown is reset. This results in some satisfying dashes through large groups or lines of minions. In December I started to prepare the game for the early access release that was scheduled for the beginning of January. This included some important things for accessibility, such as controller support and hotkey rebinding support. I also started working on more characters, and for that to work out I needed a character select screen. It was now I realized that it was the gamma correction in my lighting shader that was the cause of the washed out colors, so I fixed that. Then it was time to actually implement the new characters, starting with Thor. He was the first of the new characters, so we got some extra love with unique effects for weapon throw and weapon swing, with lightning instead of the normal swing effects. His passive ability, called Storm's Fury, makes cooldowns recharge 100% faster for 3 seconds after taking damage. A really good one if you want to do your abilities often, but are not afraid of taking a bit of damage. Next I added the Ghostly Nun and 2 new abilities, Flame Walk and Ghost Teleport. The Ghostly Nun's passive and tangibility allows her to move through most static objects on the map. Flame Walk leaves lava poles behind the character while active, which deals damage to any enemies standing inside them. Ghost Teleport is an ability closely inspired by Sylvana's Haunting Wave in Heroes of the Storm. He sends out a ghost, and if you activate the ability again, you teleport to the ghost's position and the ghost disappears. The ghost can be targeted by abilities, which means it sometimes will be good to activate the teleport and sometimes not. I also wanted to have more than one map for the early access release, so I added a new map called Pirate Island. To save time, I based the map on an example scene in a pirate asset pack I had bought from Synthi. Looking back, this map has a little bit too much terrain getting in the way, making it hard to see the character in some areas, but it looks quite pretty. Then I added another map called The Forge. It has the same deal as a pirate map, just made with another asset pack. A bit better with more open areas and not as many things that can obstruct the view, even though some areas still have that issue. The last thing I added to the game before the early access release was a 4th character, Rugnir. He is made of stone and inspired by Tiny from Dota. His passive grow makes him increase in size every 10th level and gain some stats such as more max health and attack damage. I made a video of the process of making this character where I go into a bit more detail about how I add new characters to the game. If you are interested in watching that, there should be a button in the top right corner for it, and I'll also add a link in the description to it. After the new year, there were not many days left until the early access release, so the focus was mostly on bug fixes and some other tweaks to get ready for it. On January 9th, I released the game into Steam Early Access. The sales were pretty much as expected based on the number of wishlists I had, which was not great. It was far from making the game a success financially, but that's the way it is. So now it was time to just finish the game by adding the stuff I had in mind for the game, and that I had said would be added during Early Access. and then later move on to the next project. The first update I made in early access was about improving the collision handling in the game. Before, whenever you collided with something, your character would just go to a complete stop until you tried to move in a direction that was completely free from collisions. This did not feel that good and could definitely be improved. So I added a system that makes the character move along colliders when it's colliding instead of stopping, which made it feel much smoother and not as punishing when running into things. The next update was all about improving the boss. Until now, the boss did not have any proper pathfinding. It just ran in a straight line towards the player, and if there was anything in the way, he would turn around and try again at a different angle. This did not really work that well, as the boss could easily get lost or stuck, and then the player had to try to find him, which was not ideal. So I implemented pathfinding for him with the A-star algorithm. I made a video about the process that you can watch by clicking the info card in the top right corner. I'll also link it in the description if you want to watch it after this video. But this time I got some more feedback from players of the game, and one recurring thing was to add attacking while moving. I guess that was due to other games in the genre like Vampire Survivors and such had this more laid-back style with a minimal control of the character. I did not want to change the basic attacks to this, since the idea of the game is that it should feel and play more like a MOBA game control-wise. However, I thought about a solution that would fit into the game. Simply make a new character that has this functionality as its passive ability. So I created a character I called Grendel's Mother that can attack while moving, but to compensate she deals half the damage. She also came with a new ability called Bloodlust that increases the attack speed for a while when activated. In February I started working on improvements for the minions. The thing mostly missing was some variety, since so far there had only been one basic type of minion. I decided to base them on the 4 elements, since that was a design that would be easy to deliver without having to do any bone animations on them. I wanted to avoid having to do bone animations on the minions, since the system for bone animations that I use that comes with Raylib runs on the CPU and does not scale very well with a high number of units. The first 2 I added were the fire minion and the earth minion. I wanted all the minions to have a unique difference to the basic minion. The fire minion started out having a longer range on its attack. However, after some feedback I changed it to just deal more damage than the basic one, since having a minion with a long range attack sort of made things a bit too harsh. The earth minion's thing is that it has more health than the basic minion. All the elemental minions give double the experience compared to the basic minion to make up for being harder to deal with. In the next update I added the ice and air minions. The ice one puts a slow debuff on the player for a few seconds when it attacks, and the air minion moves much faster than the other minions. After the minion update I started working on differentiating the maps from each other a bit more. What hostile abilities spawn and how many that spawn at the same time is based on what wave is currently active. In a game round there are 20 waves, each has a certain types of abilities and group sizes defined. So far all the maps had the exact same waves, so I started by adding 4 new hostile abilities: Ice Projectile, Whirlwind, Arc and Spin, and Galaxy Orb. Ice Projectile deals a small amount of damage and adds a slow debuff to the player if hit. Whirlwind deals a small amount of damage and stuns the player for a short duration if hit. Arc and Spin is the spinning line that damages the player if hit. And finally, the Galaxy Orb is a circle that increases in size the longer it travels and deals more damage to the player the larger it is. I decided to put 1 crowd control ability on each map. The first map will have the Ice Projectile, since that is the least punishing form of crowd control. The second map has a Root Projectile and the third the Stunning Whirlwind. In addition, the first map uses more flame strikes, while the second introduces the Galaxy Orb in the early waves, and the third map the same but with the Arc and Spin. In the same update I also added 2 new healing abilities, since there was only one in the game so far: Healing Circle and Healing Potion. Healing Circle creates a circle on the ground and after a few seconds heals the player and any other allied characters inside it. Healing Potion places a potion on the ground that grows a little over time. When picked up by the player it will heal based on its size. Going into Mars I was getting close to the date I had planned for the full release, since I had planned the early access period to be just a few months. I reworked the curse system for the game here to have a good system to increase the difficulty for anyone that wanted a harder challenge. There was a curse upgrade already that sort of did this, but it was a bit outdated at this point. The upgrade increased the number of hostile abilities that spawn as well as the damage. But there were minions in the game now which were not affected by this at all, so I split those into 4 different curses: ability count, ability damage, minion count and minion damage. It was also time to add reroll, banish and lock features to the upgrades. These are things most of these games give you as options to better steer your games as you have unlocked most of the meta upgrades. Then I really wanted to add a new map to the game, so I went for that next. This time I made sure to keep the number of view obstructing objects to a minimum. There are still a few in some places, since the map should not be completely empty and boring, but it is much better than on the Pirate Island map and the Forge map. This map is also the hardest map. It has all the crowd control abilities and has more minion spawns and ability spawns than the other maps. Next it was time to extend the character roster. I started by adding a monk character. This one was inspired by a specific build for the monk class in Guild Wars 1, which had an ability that made it so you could not take more than 10% of your maximum health as damage from a single ability or attack. This ability was used with healing over time abilities in combination with using special gear that reduced the maximum health of the character to the minimum possible. The result was you being pretty much invulnerable as long as there were not too many enemies attacking you at the same time. So I made that ability the passive ability for the monk character. It also starts with a new ability Holy Fire, which when active damages a random nearby enemy whenever the character takes damage. Then I added a ranger character. She starts with a bear ability, which gives you a bear that can attack enemies and be targeted by hostile abilities. It is a character for people that want a little bit more of a multitask challenge. During this time I also added achievements to the game. I made sure to have a mix of simple progress achievements, such as reach level 50 in the game and defeat all 20 waves with this character, and more unique achievements such as achieve a movement speed of 140 units per second or higher and eliminate 50 minions with a single attack or ability. Now we have gotten to April and very close to the full release of the game, so I added the final new character to the game, Abaddon. His passive makes him immune to crowd control effects, but whenever you get hit by a crowd control effect, your healing is reduced by 50% for 10 seconds. This character is perfect for the players that find the crowd control effects to be too frustrating, but it still makes sense to try to dodge them so you can keep up your healing. The final thing I added before the full release was leaderboards. This was something requested by several players throughout the game's development, and I personally find it fun to chase the highest score on a leaderboard in a game like this. The leaderboards are separated by map and divided into 3 types: minion kills, overtime and curse. Minion kills is self-explanatory, and overtime is simply the time survived in the final death wave in the game. Curse is the total number of curse upgrades unlocked in the skill tree if you manage to survive all 20 waves. In total this resulted in 12 leaderboards. On April 13th I released the 1.0 update taking Sidestep Legends out of early access. There was a small increase in sales, but nothing large enough to make a real difference towards making the game a financial success. But I am happy with what I accomplished during this year with the game nonetheless. So this was an overview of the whole development process for my game Sidestep Legends, and I consider the game finished and will most likely not add any more significant features or content to the game, just some bug fixes as needed and some new combo upgrades that I did not have time to add for the full release. Soon I will start planning the next game, so make sure to subscribe to the channel to not miss any devlogs I upload about that. I want to thank anyone that watched all the way to the end and check out Sidestep Legends on Steam. Buying that or my other game Dextram is the best way to support me to enable me to make more content on the channel in the future. Bye!